We are, we are just within 3 weeks of finishing out the year of our Bible reading. And so in the Old Testament, we are beginning our last book this week, the book of Job, which will take us to the end of the year. But before that, we wrap up the historical material of the Old Testament, chronologically speaking, as well as look at the final prophet, again, chronologically, and in order of books in the Old Testament. So let's talk about that and get the PowerPoint pulled up here. And the book of Nehemiah, we've been looking at Ezra and Nehemiah, these historical accounts of those like Zerubbabel and Ezra and Nehemiah that returned from Persia by this point to initiate and to lead these reforms in Judah among those that have returned from exile. And so remember in Nehemiah, after building the walls, there is also this great spiritual restoration that takes place. Chapter 9 was the big prayer of confession, and that sets up this vow that is made to renew the covenant, and there is clearly efforts being led by Nehemiah and Ezra as well to make sure the people are recommitting themselves to Jehovah, that all the duties of the Levites are handled properly according to the law. And there is even this great celebration that takes place at the end of Nehemiah, and the different choruses that are set up on the walls praising God together. And yet, in spite of all of that, the last chapter of Nehemiah shows us how there is still unfaithfulness to the covenant. Nehemiah is outraged as he sees people having compromised the duties apportioned in the temple and the resources that are allotted to folks in the temple. And there is plenty of people all over town working on the Sabbath, violating God's covenant. And so, in spite of all the best efforts, it seems, still, there is this disappointment. As we close the history of the Israelite people in the Old Testament, still they are not truly and wholly faithful to God and His covenant. And that leads in nicely, actually, to Malachi. The message of Malachi is a little bit later on. He is the last prophet that we have record of in the Old Testament. And so here we are just within a few hundred years even of Jesus coming, and yet the people are polluted. Their sacrifices to God are only what is left over, what is blind, what is lame. They have questioned, even challenged God's love for them and faithfulness to them. They have divorced their wives and been unfaithful to those covenants. And so, especially in Malachi 3 and 4, the prophecy is that God is going to do something. The day of the Lord is coming, and there will be a messenger coming to prepare the way for God Himself. It will be a purifying fire to cleanse the people. And notice in chapter 4, with the prophecy that ends up being fulfilled in John the Baptist, it is someone coming to restore and to return the hearts of the people to each other as well as to the Lord. And that's really the problem. The heart has not yet been transformed, and that is what God is going to do through the Messiah. Okay, now we make a clean break. And since Job is a book that is unique, not only in its not really fitting into the history of the Old Testament, as well as unique in some ways in its content, we stick it right here at the end and finish off the year with the book of Job. So let's say a couple things about this. We're familiar, perhaps, with Job's suffering. We're familiar with those first 2 chapters of Satan bargaining, so to speak, with God and saying, hey, what about Job? What if you take away all his stuff? He'll deny you. And God allows Job to be tested in this way. But when you actually get into the conversation, which makes up the vast majority of the book, the conversations between Job and his friends, it's really more so about this. Is God just? This is a book that seriously challenges, questions the justice of God. It asks the hard questions that we often want to ask ourselves. Why would God do this to somebody who is so not only innocent, but righteous? Job's friends will say, as we see, God is just. He does run the world according to this strict sense of justice. And so therefore, if you're suffering, you're in the wrong. You're a sinner, Job. You need to repent. Job, however, knows that he is righteous, knows that he's innocent. He has thought all along, it seems, that God does run the world this way, but now he is questioning and saying, God, let me somehow bring my case before you. This isn't fair. And the other thing that we want to keep in mind through all of this is the question that Satan asks in the beginning, which is this: will man serve God for nothing? That is a question. that is pertinent all throughout the history of God's people. Well, people serve God even if they get nothing out of it. And Job is a test case for that. And so not only do we want to focus our attention on God in this book and learning about God, the way he works, the way he doesn't work, and admiring his just wisdom, but we also want to look at Job as an example of suffering and maintaining integrity and replicate that in our lives even when we don't understand what's going on. Okay, that's week 50. Check back in next week for week 51. Thank you so much.